15 years in landscaping has taught me one thing. Nobody plans to ruin their backyard. It happens one good idea at a time. A homeowner calls me in April, proud of what they built last fall. By July, they're asking how much it costs to undo it. I've stood in yards where the fix cost more than the original mortgage payment. I've watched a 4-figure weekend project turn into a 5-figure teardown 18 months later. And one mistake on this list, sitting at number 5, isn't about money at all. It's the one call in 15 years I still think about. You'll understand exactly what I mean when we get there. We've got 13 mistakes to get through, ranked from bad to absolutely brutal. Before we start, hit subscribe, tap like, and share this with someone about to break ground on a backyard project this year. It might save them thousands. Let's start at number 13. Mixing metal finishes that fight each other outdoors work. Would you pair a stainless steel fire bowl with a rusting iron table and call it eclectic? Because that's what's happening in half the backyards I walk into. Homeowners buy patio pieces one season at a time. A fire pit here, a set of chairs there, a planter on sale in October. Nobody's thinking about metal compatibility. They're thinking about what looked good in the store. Here's the hidden problem. Different metals corrode at wildly different rates outdoors, especially anywhere near a pool or coastal air. Uncoated steel starts weeping rust streaks onto stone and pavers within a single season, staining surfaces that cost real money to clean. Aluminum stays pristine right next to it, which only makes the rust more obvious by comparison. The fix is boring but effective. Pick one finish family: powder-coated aluminum, stainless, or properly sealed wrought iron, and stick to it across every piece you add. It costs nothing extra to plan ahead. It costs a pressure washing service every spring if you don't. But mismatched metal is nothing compared to what's happening at the base of your trees. And that's mistake 12. 12. Piling mulch into a volcano around every tree trunk isn't tidy. That neat little mulch cone stacked against your tree trunk isn't tidy. It's slowly strangling the tree. Landscaping crews do this because it's fast. Dump the mulch, mound it up against the trunk, move to the next tree. It looks intentional. It looks like effort was made. Homeowners assume more mulch against the trunk means more protection. The opposite is true. Bark that stays constantly damp against piled mulch starts to rot, and that rotting bark becomes an open door for insects and fungal disease. Meanwhile, the tree's shallow feeder roots, starved for oxygen under all that depth, start growing up into the mulch pile instead of down into the soil, which makes the tree less stable in wind, not more protected. The fix takes 10 minutes per tree. Pull mulch back at least 3 inches from the trunk, taper it into a flat donut shape instead of a volcano, and keep the total depth around 2 to 3 inches. Free to fix, and it adds years to a tree's life. But even a healthy tree won't save your yard from what's creeping under the fence line in mistake 11. 11. Planting running bamboo with no rhizome barrier number tom. Nothing on this list spreads faster, or with less mercy, than bamboo planted without a barrier. Homeowners plant it for instant, dense privacy, and it delivers, fast. That's exactly the problem. Running bamboo varieties send out underground rhizomes that can travel 20 feet or more in a single growing season, popping up through lawns, driveways, even through a neighbor's foundation planting beds. By the time most people notice new shoots appearing 30 feet from the original planting, the rhizome network is already established and nearly impossible to fully remove without professional excavation, sometimes running into thousands of dollars, plus the very real risk of a neighbor dispute when their yard starts sprouting your bamboo. The fix, if you love the look, is a heavy-gauge rhizome barrier installed 30 inches deep around the entire planting before you ever put a single cane in the ground. Or better yet, choose a clumping bamboo variety instead of a running one. Same tropical look, zero underground ambush. Quick reminder before we keep going, hit subscribe, like this video, and share it with anyone eyeing bamboo at the garden center this spring. It could save their whole yard. Next up, the mistake that fails silently until the day it doesn't. 10. Building a pergola without checking the footing depth and terrain. Here's a question almost nobody asks before building a pergola. How deep do the posts actually need to go? And does anyone here actually know your local frost line? This is the mistake that keeps me up at night, because it's invisible until it isn't. A pergola looks finished the day it's built. Level, solid, beautiful. Homeowners never think to ask whether the contractor set the posts below the frost line, because the structure isn't holding back water or a hot tub, it's just standing there. But every winter, freezing soil expands and contracts, and posts set too shallow get slowly heaved upward, fraction of an inch by fraction of an inch. Nobody notices for 2 or 3 years. Then suddenly one post is visibly higher than the others, the whole frame racks out of square, and what looked like a permanent structure is now leaning enough that a strong wind could bring it down. The fix: footings poured below the regional frost line, often 36 to 48 inches in colder climates, set in concrete, with the post anchored on a bracket rather than buried directly in the ground, which also stops rot at the base. It costs more up front than a quick weekend build. It's the difference between a pergola that lasts 30 years and one you're rebuilding in 5. 9. Relying on a single floodlight instead of layered lighting when darker. One giant motion-activated floodlight mounted under the eave. Does that actually make your backyard feel safer? Or does it just make everything past its beam feel darker? Homeowners install a single bright floodlight because it's the cheapest, fastest lighting decision available. Screw it in. Done. Box checked. The problem is contrast. A floodlight blasts one zone into stark white light and throws everything outside that beam into deeper shadow than before you installed it, which means the areas you actually can't see from the house are now harder to see than ever. It also means the light snaps on and off constantly, triggered by every passing cat and blowing branch, training you to ignore it entirely, which defeats the point of having it in the first place. The fix is layers, not one blast. Soft path lighting at ankle height, a couple of warm-up lights washing tree trunks or a fence line, and motion lighting reserved specifically for entry points, not the whole yard. It costs more than one floodlight. It actually makes the space usable and safe at night instead of just bright in one spot. 8. Digging a backyard pond with an undersized pump. A backyard pond sounds peaceful, right up until it turns into a green, algae-choked eyesore by July. And it usually comes down to one part nobody budgeted properly. DIYers price out a pond based on the liner and the rocks, because that's what's visible in the finished photos. The pump is treated as an afterthought, whatever fits the budget after everything else is bought. But a pump that's undersized for the pond's actual volume can't circulate the water fast enough to stay oxygenated and clear. Within weeks, algae blooms take over, the water turns pea green, and if there are fish involved, oxygen levels can drop low enough to kill them. What was supposed to be the calming centerpiece of the yard becomes the thing guests politely avoid mentioning. The fix is simple math done before you dig. Your pump needs to circulate the entire pond volume roughly once every 1 to 2 hours, which usually means sizing up from whatever feels adequate. Pair it with proper biological filtration, and a pond stays clear instead of becoming a swamp with a nice border. Before we go further, hit subscribe, tap like, and share this with someone building a pond this summer. They need this math before they dig, not after. Now the mistakes start getting harder to undo. 7. Planting invasive English ivy as a no-mow ground cover. Would you plant something specifically because it never stops growing? That's the entire appeal of English ivy, and it's also exactly why it becomes a nightmare. Homeowners choose ivy as ground cover because it promises to fill in bare patches fast and never needs mowing. It delivers on that promise almost too well. Left unchecked, ivy doesn't just cover the ground, it climbs. It works its way up trees, fences, and siding, and once it reaches a tree trunk, it can eventually shade out the tree's own leaves and add enough weight to make the tree unstable in storms. On siding, ivy's aerial rootlets work into seams and behind trim, trapping moisture against the wall and accelerating rot you won't discover until you try to pull the vine off, and half the siding comes with it. The fix is switching to a well-behaved native ground cover, creeping phlox or wild ginger, depending on your sun exposure, that fills space without the climbing habit. If ivy's already established, removal means cutting it at the base of every tree and structure immediately, not waiting for someday. 6. Skipping the permit before building a deck moment. Here's a mistake that doesn't show up until the exact moment you try to sell your house. Homeowners skip the permit process on a deck build because it feels like unnecessary paperwork for something they're building on their own property. The contractor either doesn't mention it or quietly skips it to save time. The deck goes up, looks great, gets used for years without incident. Then comes the closing table. A home inspection during a sale reveals an unpermitted structure, and in many municipalities, that triggers a requirement to either retroactively permit it, which can mean tearing open finished framing for inspection, or remove it entirely before the sale can close. I've seen deals delayed for weeks over a deck that was otherwise perfectly built, purely because there was no paper trail. The fix costs a small filing fee and a couple of inspections during the build. It's tedious. It's also the only way to guarantee that the deck you're proud of today doesn't become a closing day crisis 5 years from now. 5. Installing a playset with no real fall zone surfacing. This is the mistake that isn't about money. This is the one that costs you something you can't buy back. And in 15 years, it's the one I never got used to. Backyard playsets go up fast, usually over a weekend, straight onto whatever's already there. Grass, a patch of dirt, sometimes just packed soil. It looks complete. The kids are thrilled. Nobody's thinking about what happens 6 inches below where their feet will land. Here's what almost nobody accounts for. Grass and hard-packed dirt offer almost no shock absorption, and most playground injuries happen from falls, not from equipment failure. The surfacing underneath a swing set or slide isn't decoration, it's the actual safety system, and skipping it is the single most common oversight I see in backyards with young kids. I've been called to a yard after an accident that proper surfacing would have completely prevented, and that's not a story I can make sound lighter than it is. The fix is non-negotiable. A minimum of 9 to 12 inches of certified playground mulch, rubber mulch, or poured rubber surfacing, extending well beyond the equipment's fall zone in every direction. It costs a few $100s. It is the cheapest, most important thing you will ever install in a backyard. If you take one thing from this entire video, take this. The safety underneath the fun is never optional. Hold on to that. It connects straight to the mistake at number 1. Quick reminder, if this video means something to you, hit subscribe, like it, and share it with any parent installing a playset this year. It genuinely matters more than anything else on this list. 4. Overloading a pergola roof with heavy lighting and planters cams. That gorgeous pergola dripping with string lights, hanging planters, and a heavy fabric canopy. Beautiful in photos, and quietly overloaded in real life. Homeowners treat a pergola's open lattice roof as a blank canvas for decoration, adding string lights, hanging baskets, and sometimes a full retractable canopy over time. One addition per season. Each individual piece seems light enough on its own. Nobody adds up the cumulative weight, or checks what the original rafters were actually rated to hold. The consequence builds slowly. Rafters begin to sag almost imperceptibly under sustained weight, especially after a heavy rain soaks fabric or waterlogs hanging planters. Eventually, a rafter that's been quietly overstressed for years snaps, often during exactly the kind of wind or wet weather that put the most load on it in the first place. The fix. Know your pergola's rated load before you decorate it. Distribute weight across multiple rafters rather than concentrating it. And treat anything heavier than lightweight string lights as a structural addition that deserves a second look from whoever built the frame. 3. Choosing sun-loving grass for a shady yard dowd. Why does your lawn look lush at the front of the house and patchy and thin the moment it hits the shade of that big oak tree? It's rarely a watering problem. It's a seed problem. Builders and big-box sod suppliers default to sun-loving grass varieties because they're the cheapest, most widely available option, and they get laid down across an entire property regardless of how much shade different sections actually receive. Grass bred for full sun simply can't photosynthesize enough under heavy tree canopy to sustain itself. It thins out, weakens, and eventually gets replaced by moss and weeds that are better adapted to low light, which homeowners then blame on bad soil or not enough water, when the real issue was the seed choice from day one. The fix is matching grass to the actual light map of your yard. Shade-tolerant fescue blends under tree canopy, sun-loving varieties everywhere else, sometimes with a ground cover alternative in the deepest shade, where grass was never going to thrive, regardless of the seed bag. 2. Ignoring the slope when pouring a patio. A patio that looks perfectly flat can still be sending water exactly where you don't want it, straight toward your foundation. Contractors under time pressure sometimes pour a patio dead level because it's faster and looks cleaner on installation day. Homeowners, focused on the finish and the furniture layout, rarely think to ask about drainage slope at all. The hidden consequence shows up the first time it really rains. Without a slight grade, usually about a quarter inch of fall per foot, angled away from the house, water pools on the surface or worse, sheets directly toward the foundation, where it can eventually work into basement walls or crawl spaces. I've seen patios that looked flawless for years suddenly correlate with a damp basement nobody could explain, until someone finally checked the grading. The fix has to happen before the pour, not after. Confirm the slope with the contractor in writing, verify it away from the house, and if a patio already exists without proper grading, a French drain along the problem edge can redirect water without tearing anything out. 1. Never testing your soil before you plant or build anything safe. Here's the uncomfortable truth. None of the other 12 mistakes are really where they start. They all trace back to this one. And in 15 years, it's the single most common root cause behind every callback I've ever gotten. Almost nobody tests their soil before they plant a bed, pour a patio, or plan drainage. It feels like an unnecessary step when the ground already looks fine. Brown, solid, ready to build on. But soil composition determines almost everything downstream. How well water drains, which plants will actually thrive, versus slowly struggle. Whether a footing needs to go deeper, even whether that patio slope you carefully calculated will actually work with how the ground absorbs or sheds water. The hidden consequence is that homeowners spend years treating symptoms instead of causes, replacing dead plants that were never wrong for the space, just wrong for soil nobody checked, or fighting drainage problems that a $5 test would have predicted before the first shovel went in. I've watched people spend tens of thousands of dollars across years solving problems a basic soil test would have flagged on day one. And that's before you consider everything else on this list: the pergola footing, the fall zone surfacing, the pond, the lawn. Every single one of them performs better when you actually know what you're building on top of. The fix costs almost nothing. A simple soil test kit or a local extension office analysis for under $50 tells you pH, drainage rate, and composition before you commit to anything permanent. It's the cheapest thing on this entire list, and it's the one step that would have prevented more callbacks than everything else combined. If there's one principle to take from all 13 of these, it's this. Almost every backyard regret isn't a materials problem or a bad luck problem. It's an information problem. A decision made without knowing something that was entirely knowable beforehand. The families who never call me with an emergency aren't the ones who spent the most. They're the ones who asked one more question before the shovel ever hit the ground. If you recognized even 2 or 3 of these in your own yard, you're not alone, and none of them are unfixable. But before you touch the backyard again, you need to see the front yard mistakes quietly hurting your home's value from the street. And that video is right here. Hit subscribe, like this one on your way out, and I'll see you in the next video.